1-1 pitch. He hits it to deep left center. Look out! Do you believe it? It's gone! Nobody out, and they're loaded in the 11th. That's it! Wrigley Field is an absolute madhouse. The Cubs, who trailed 7-1, 9-3, 11-9 in the 10th, they come back and win it 12-11. Can't remember the last time I saw a better one.
Welcome back to MLB Central as we continue to honor the legacy of the late, great Ryne Sandberg. Bob Costas, the Hall of Fame broadcaster, joins us now here in Studio 21. We came in with this segment, Bob, with the Sandberg Game, June 23rd, 1984. You're in the booth with Tony Kubek, part of NBC's Game of the Week. What are now, all these years later, and now fresh off the news of Ryne's passing, what comes to mind when you hear and see those images?
That one game and those moments created a 4-decade friendship. I'm connected to Ryne Sandberg. I was just lucky enough to be there. He did all of it. But every time we crossed paths, that was the subject of conversation. And when they unveiled the statue for him on the 40th anniversary on June 23rd, 2024, he was nice enough to ask me to preside and introduce him as they unveiled the statue. And that day, the one thing that sticks out about that day, 40 years later, Craig Counsell led all the Cub players in uniform onto a balcony overlooking Gallagher and where the ceremony was taking place. And my wife was in the front row, and she pointed, because I was looking the other way, like, look at that. And I looked back, and there it was. And the word that occurred to me was, that's respect, which brings me to this. This is from his Hall of Fame speech in 2005. Make a great play, act like you've done it before. Get a big hit, look for the third base coach, and get ready to run the bases. Hit a home run, put your head down, drop the bat, run around the bases, because the name on the front is a lot more important than the name on the back. That's respect. Now, even then, in '84, he stood out. But the contrast now, no histrionics at all. He was an elegant player, not so much a spectacular player. He hardly ever made an error. He won Gold Gloves by playing errorless ball more so than making leaping, spectacular plays. He had long stretches of errorless games. He had one season where he hit 40 home runs, but his stats were not overwhelming. They're not in the Judge Ohtani or someone like that class. He got to the Hall of Fame with sustained excellence. And that year, '84, when he won the MVP, he only hit 19 home runs, 2 of them in that epic game. But he hit 19 triples, which led the league, and stole a bunch of bases and played Gold Glove second base. He was a flawless player, more so than he was a spectacular player.
But he was an unheralded player.
For a while.
When he was drafted. 20th round out of Spokane, Washington. And then he plays just a few games with the Philadelphia Phillies before he's part of a trade. Larry Boa and Sandberg for Ivan DeJesus going from Philly to Chicago. And it just strikes me how basically a throw-in player ultimately becomes one of the cornerstones and faces of the franchise.
Well, a couple of ironies here. Dallas Green had managed the Phillies to the World Championship in 1980. Now, just a few years later, he's in Chicago. He's running their baseball operation. He must have known something about Ryne Sandberg. That's one of the great deals ever. Now, Ryne Sandberg wore number 23. Michael Jordan didn't begin playing for the Bulls until the fall of 1984.
That's true.
In the summer of 1984, number 23 in Chicago meant Ryne Sandberg.
Oh, that's remarkable. All these years later, he still is so revered. Even by the franchise, but also by a group of fans nationally who, like myself, grew up watching Cubs games. I wasn't necessarily a Cubs fan, but you come home on an afternoon from school or in the middle of the summer, the Cubs are playing at 1 o'clock Central Time at Wrigley Field, and WGN has the call, and Harry Carey's behind the mic.
It was a perfect confluence. TBS in Atlanta was showing you Braves games, and that made a lot of Braves fans around the country. And the Cubs, the same thing, because those games, especially because all the games were in the afternoon, like you say, come home from school or come home a little bit early from work. They didn't get lights until 5 years after the Sandberg game. And it all comes together. Harry Carey had just come across town from the White Sox, where he was very popular. But now with the Cubs, especially because they got good all of a sudden and almost made it to the World Series, and you've got those afternoon games at Wrigley Field, and there was no one quite like Harry Carey. And Sandberg is the poster boy player. Even though he didn't carry himself that way, there's no denying that he's the signature player of the Cubs. All that stuff comes together at one time. And to your point, even though you could watch them on WGN, a lot of people who weren't watching them on a Tuesday afternoon were watching the game of the week on Saturday on NBC with Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola. Prior to that with Kurt Gowdy. I was lucky enough to be with Tony. The game is seen by the entire country, and back then, not as many games. WGN excluded, and TBS, and maybe New York and a few other markets. For the most part, the games were still primarily on radio, except for that Saturday game of the week. So if you lived in Montana, you didn't mow your lawn during those 2.5, 3 hours. That's when you could see Fernando Valenzuela face Johnny Bench, or in this case, see the Cardinals play the Cubs. And it mattered that it was the Cardinals because it's a rivalry there. And in that game, Ozzie Smith made a couple of typical Ozzie Smith plays. As you heard, Willie McGee, who would be the MVP the next year, hit for the cycle and wasn't the player of the game. You know, in the 80s, there were a bunch of really good baseball movies. 8 Men Out. I think League of Their Own was in the 80s.
Major League, too.
Major League with the great Bob Uecker basically carrying the entire film. Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, and also Barry Levinson's The Natural. And The Natural had just come out a month or two before the game in question, the Sandberg game. And it just occurred to me as the tumult was dying down, maybe this is the real Roy Hobbs, because this is something, you know, if you handed someone a script, they wouldn't believe it.
Well, Bob, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks for the perspective. And again, that Sandberg game, like I said, I can vividly remember watching it on my little black and white TV up in my room. So thanks for coming in to honor Ryne Sandberg.